Merry Christmas! We are on day 6 of our Christmas season, and today we are going to read a little bit more from Christmas Love Letters from God. This was written by Glenys Nellist, and we read this a couple of weeks ago, and it was Isaiah's portion where he was telling us about Jesus' birth way before it even happened. And today we're going to read about Mary, Joseph, their journey to Bethlehem, and the birth of Jesus. So this one is Mary's song, and it's coming from the Bible verses that can be found in Luke chapter 1, verses 26 through 38, and verses 46 through 50. In her little home in Nazareth, Mary had just finished sweeping the floor when she heard a strange noise behind her. It sounded like a rustling in the air, a whispering of silvery wings. Mary turned around and nearly fainted in fear. There, right in front of her, stood a beautiful angel. "Hello, Mary," the angel said softly. "God is with you." Mary was terrified, but the angel smiled and said, "Don't be afraid. God has chosen you to be the mother of his son." "But how can that be?" Mary cried. "I'm not married." "Don't worry," the angel replied. "Trust God. You must name your little boy Jesus. He will be the king of the whole world." Mary listened in wonder to the angel's words. Could it be true? Was she really going to have a baby? Would he be a king? Mary's heart filled with joy, and she bowed her head and whispered, "I'm ready, God." As the angel Gabriel flew back to heaven, Mary closed her eyes and began to sing softly. "Oh, my soul, my heart is singing, and my spirit fills with joy, for I will be the mama of a precious baby boy. And God will be the papa of that special baby son. All the people will remember what the Mighty One has done." As Mary sang, her words floated up into heaven. When God heard them, he smiled. And when Mary opened her eyes, the sun was shining, streaming straight through her window. To Mary, it felt like God's warm and wonderful blessings were falling upon her, covering her from the top of her head to the tips of her toes. And they were. So now I'm going to read your love letter from God. Dear you, how do you feel when you hear people singing Christmas carols? Does it make you feel happy and warm inside? When I heard Mary singing her song, that was how I felt. It made me so happy inside. I knew she had listened to me, and she was ready to do what I asked. When you listen to me, and you are ready to do what I ask, my wonderful blessings will shine on you too. With love, God. And here it says, God's perfect promise. The light of my blessing will shine on you. Isaiah chapter 58, verse 8. Now, let's hear about Joseph's dream. This comes from Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 through 24. Joseph could not sleep. He tossed and turned in the bed. Was his pillow too hard? No, it was not his pillow keeping him awake. It was something he had heard about Mary. Mary was the only girl Joseph loved, the one he had promised to marry. But how could he marry her now? Mary was going to have a baby, and that baby would be God's son. How could that possibly be? Who had ever heard of such a thing? Joseph closed his eyes. As he drifted off to sleep, he heard the voice of an angel singing softly into the darkness. Joseph, son of David, what Mary says is true. But please don't be afraid. God will show you what to do. You need to be with Mary, the only girl you love, because she has been chosen from above. She's going to have a baby. He really is God's son. You must name him Jesus. he will be the chosen one. He needs someone to love him, to watch him learn and grow. Will you help be his daddy? God really needs to know. When Joseph woke up, the air in the room seemed to dance and glitter in the early morning sun, and Joseph knelt by his bed and said yes to God. So your love letter from God. Dear you, I am so glad Joseph said yes to me. I knew he would be a wonderful husband to Mary and a good daddy for Jesus. What a special job he had. Never be afraid to say yes to me. When you hear those quiet whispers in your heart, whatever I say, whatever I might ask you to do, remember that just like I helped Joseph, I will help you too. Love, God. And God's perfect promise from Isaiah 41, verse 10. I will make you strong and help you. Now let's hear about their journey to Bethlehem. This comes from Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. Mary put her hand on her tummy as she finished packing her bags for the journey ahead. It wasn't long now before her little boy would be born, but before he came, she had to travel all the way to Bethlehem with Joseph. 70 miles! That was such a long way, but Mary and Joseph had no choice. They had to go back to their hometown to be counted. Mary packed some bread for the journey while Joseph draped a blanket over the donkey's back. Are you ready, Mary? Joseph called. Mary pulled her shawl over her head as Joseph helped her climb onto the little donkey. I'm ready, Joseph, she said. As Joseph took the donkey's reins, Mary took one last look at the home she was leaving in Nazareth. She did not know what might happen in Bethlehem, but no matter what, Mary was ready. She knew Joseph would take care of her, and God would take care of her baby. And so Mary and Joseph set off on Bethlehem's road. Traveling through the nighttime, traveling through the day, a donkey carried Mary all along the way. Up and down the hillsides, over rock and sand, Joseph walked beside her, holding Mary's hand. Through the woods and valleys until they saw the sight, a little town called Bethlehem, where they would spend the night. What would happen in this place? Mary did not know. She only knew that where she went, God was sure to go. By the time Mary and Joseph reached the little town of Bethlehem, every inn was full. The only room for them was a small stable. Mary was so tired she curled up in the soft hay and fell fast asleep. Joseph covered her with his cloak as darkness and quiet fell all around. Even though it was quiet, Joseph knew they weren't alone. God was there. God was in the quiet, and God was in the darkness waiting for his son to be born. And now your love letter from God. Dear you, who do you think was leading the way on that long road to Bethlehem? Do you think it was Joseph? Or maybe the donkey? Well, guess what? I was in the lead. I went in front of Mary and Joseph to guide them all the way to Bethlehem. I will lead you in your life too. Wherever you travel, I will go before you. With love, God. And God's perfect promise from Isaiah 45, verse 2. I will march out ahead of you. Now, let's hear about Jesus. Jesus' joy. This is coming from Luke chapter 2, verses 6 and 7. Mary hadn't been asleep very long when she suddenly woke up. Even though it was the middle of the night, the darkness had gone. A huge star was peeping in through the window of the little stable. In its light, Mary could see the cows and sheep curled up in the soft hay. Mary sat up. She shook Joseph by the shoulder. "Wake up, Joseph," she cried. "It's time for our baby to be born." Joseph jumped up and rubbed his eyes. He saw the bright shining star through the window. "This is what we've been waiting for, Mary," Joseph whispered. It was time to welcome Jesus into the world. In a little stable in the middle of the night, while all the cows lay sleeping and a star was shining bright, a child was born to Mary, a brand new baby boy. The bells rang out in heaven, the angels danced for joy. Baby Jesus had been born, a Savior, God's own Son, a Christmas gift from heaven, God sent for everyone. Mary cuddled Jesus and she whispered in his ear, "Welcome to the world, my love. We're so glad you're here." Mary wrapped her newborn baby in strips of cloth, while Joseph made a warm, comfy bed for him in the manger, and baby Jesus closed his eyes and went straight to sleep. Now your love letter from God. Dear you, doesn't it make you feel good when you give someone a very special gift? When I gave my son Jesus to Mary, it made me feel wonderful. And do you know why? It's because the gift of Jesus wasn't just for her. Jesus was my gift to the whole world, and that includes you. Jesus is your Savior, and He is the very best gift you could ever receive. With love, God. And God's perfect promise from Luke chapter 2, verse 11, a Savior has been born to you. That's all we'll read for today. I hope you enjoyed.